Welcome to Men Rising Strategic Analysis. I am so glad you are here with me today because we are about to go deep. Really deep. Most people look at Muhammad Ali and they just see a guy who was incredible at hitting other people. They see the speed, the footwork, the loud mouth. But man, they are missing the real story. Ali was not just a fighter. He was a geopolitical earthquake that shook the very foundations of the 20th century world order. It is wild to think about, but he was operating on a level that most world leaders could not even comprehend at the time. We are talking about a man who turned his entire career into a weapon for human rights. And honestly, it is probably the most successful strategic pivot in modern history. Beyond the punches and the bragging, there was a calculated mind at work. A mind that understood power better than the people running the Pentagon. He knew that his true strength did not lie in his gloves, but in his voice and his unwavering will to defy the system. You have to picture the world back then. It was the 1960s. The air was thick with the smell of tear gas and revolution. The Cold War was at its peak, and the United States was desperately trying to win the hearts and minds of people across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. They called it soft power. They wanted to show the world that America was the land of the free. But then along comes this young, handsome, and utterly fearless black man who says, wait a minute. He pointed out the hypocrisy in a way that no one else could. He was a global superstar, a cultural phenomenon, and he used that platform to challenge the entire American narrative. It was not just about boxing anymore. It was about the struggle for the soul of a nation and the future of the international order. Think about the courage it took to stand up and say no when the entire military-industrial complex was telling you to say yes. Ali was not just refusing to fight in a war. He was telling the most powerful country on earth that their moral authority was bankrupt. That is a heavy thing to do. It really is. And the consequences were brutal. They took his title. They took his license. They tried to take his freedom. But in doing so, they accidentally turned him into the most powerful symbol of resistance the world had ever seen. He became a non-state actor with more global influence than almost any prime minister or ambassador. He was the ultimate strategist, sacrificing his short-term wealth for long-term moral capital. And that, my friends, is why we are still talking about him today. If you have ever felt like the odds were stacked against you, or if you have a story about a leader who changed the way you see the world, please reach out to us at vadokivyankney2@gmail.com. We really want to hear from you. Let us get into the meat of this strategic analysis. The year was 1967. The United States was deep in the Vietnam quagmire. Tensions were exploding at home. And then Ali dropped the bombshell. He said, I have not got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. Boom. That was not just tough talk from a boxer. That was a strategic strike against the credibility of the United States government. By refusing the draft, Ali exposed a massive crack in the American story. While Washington was trying to export democracy to the Third World, Ali was highlighting the systemic inequality and racism right there on the streets of Louisville and Chicago. It was a public relations nightmare for the State Department. It really was. They were trying to tell nations in Africa and Asia to follow the American model. And here was the most famous black man in the world saying the system was rotten. He effectively neutralized the soft power strategy of the United States during the Cold War. Every time a U.S. diplomat talked about freedom in a foreign capital, people would point to Muhammad Ali. He became a mirror that forced the West to look at its own ugly reflection. And he did it all with a smile and a poem. He was sharp. He was disruptive. And he was completely unstoppable. He understood that the battlefield was not just in the jungles of Vietnam, but in the minds of billions of people watching on their television sets. He was practicing a form of public diplomacy that was decades ahead of its time. Then came the name change. Dropping the name Cassius Clay for Muhammad Ali was not just a personal religious choice. It was a masterstroke of international branding. By embracing Islam, he aligned himself with the entire pan-Islamic world. He bypassed the Western gatekeepers entirely. Suddenly, Ali had more influence in the streets of Lagos or Cairo than any official U.S. representative. He was greeted as a brother and a hero across the Middle East and Africa. He had built a global network of support that protected him from the pressures of the American establishment. He was operating outside the traditional power structures. He was a global citizen before the term was even popular. Truly incredible is it not? We also have to talk about the rumble in the jungle in Zaire. Most people remember the rope-a-dope and the knockout of George Foreman. But from a geopolitical standpoint, that event was massive. It was hosted by the dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, who wanted to legitimize his regime on the world stage. Ali knew exactly what was happening. He used that platform to bridge the gap between African Americans and the African continent. He was not just there to fight. He was there to assert the power and dignity of the global South. He showed the world that the so-called developing nations could host the biggest spectacle on Earth. He gave a voice to the voiceless, and he did it in front of a global audience of millions. As the years went by, the very establishment that once hated him had to acknowledge his power. By the 1990s, Ali had transitioned from a rebel to a global statesman. He proved that moral capital is often more valuable than financial capital. Remember when he traveled to Iraq in 1990 to negotiate with Saddam Hussein for the release of hostages? That was high-stakes diplomacy without a government mandate. He did what the professional diplomats could not do. He brought those people home because his reputation for integrity and justice transcended borders and politics. He had become a symbol of universal human rights. So what is the takeaway from the remarkable life of Muhammad Ali? He showed us that a single individual armed with conviction and a strategic mind can alter the trajectory of international relations. He was a bridge builder in a world full of walls. He taught us that true power is not just about military might or economic dominance. It is about the courage to stand up for what is right even when the whole world is telling you to sit down. It has been quite a ride, has it not? Ali's story reminds us that the fight for freedom is never over. It just changes venues. Thank you for sticking with us on Men Rising Strategic Analysis. I really hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on the greatest. Do not forget to share your thoughts and stories with us at vodokviankny12@gmail.com. Stay sharp, stay objective, and we will see you in the next one. Peace. But wait, let us pull back the curtain on the darkest period of this journey. When the government stripped Ali of his title in 1967, he was not just losing a gold belt. He was losing his prime years, the peak of his physical powers. Imagine being the absolute best in the world at your craft, and then suddenly you are banned from doing it. No income, no glory, just endless courtrooms and mounting debt. Most people would have crumbled under that pressure. They would have taken a plea deal or apologized just to get back into the ring. But Ali understood a principle that every modern founder needs to grasp: the law of strategic sacrifice. He knew that by giving up his short-term revenue, he was purchasing something that billions of dollars could never buy, and that is unyielding credibility. In the world of business, we call this brand equity. But for Ali, it was moral sovereignty. He was not just a boxer anymore, he had become a martyr for a global cause. And that is where the system truly messed up. They thought they were crushing him, but they were actually decoupling his influence from the boxing ring. They gave him the one thing a revolutionary needs most: time to talk. And oh, the talking. You see, Ali was the original disruptor. Before there was social media, before there were personal brands or influencer marketing, there was Muhammad Ali. He used psychological warfare as a form of market positioning. He called himself the greatest before he even knew he was. That is not just arrogance, that is visionary branding. He understood the Zeigarnik effect before psychologists were talking about it in corporate boardrooms. He created an unresolved tension in the minds of the global public. People either loved him or they desperately wanted to see him get knocked out. Either way, they paid to watch. He turned every single fight into a global referendum on race, religion, and the Vietnam War. He was not just selling a sporting event, he was selling a narrative that challenged the status quo. And in the modern attention economy, we all know that narrative is more valuable than the product itself. Fast forward to 1971. The case finally reached the Supreme Court. Clay versus United States. This was the ultimate showdown. But it did not happen in a ring with gloves, it happened in a room with robes. And this is the part that really gets me. The court originally voted 5-3 to uphold his conviction. Ali was literally headed to prison. But then something miraculous happened in the background. One of the justices changed his mind after reading about the depth of Ali's religious conviction and the sincerity of his beliefs. The final decision came back 8-0 in his favor. It was a total legal shutout. This was the moment the system officially capitulated. Ali had not just survived the establishment, he had rewritten its rules. For any entrepreneur facing a massive bureaucratic wall, this is the lesson. If your vision is deep enough and your conviction is steady, the system will eventually bend to your will. But Ali was still not done. He took this newfound global legitimacy and transformed himself into a shadow diplomat. Have you ever heard about his trip to North Korea in 1995? Yeah, you heard that right. North Korea. He went there for an international sports festival during a time of extreme tension. While the United States government had zero formal ties with Pyongyang, Ali was there walking the streets. He did not need a passport from the State Department to have influence. His face was his passport. He was perhaps the only person on Earth who could sit down with both a U.S. president and a reclusive dictator and still maintain his total integrity. He was operating on a geopolitical plane that was completely independent of national borders. He was a sovereign individual before the concept was even popularized. He was the ultimate proof that soft power, when backed by real character, outlasts any military alliance or trade embargo. Think about the strategic pivot he made after retiring from the ring. He did not just fade away into the history books. He used his Parkinson's diagnosis, a debilitating disease, as yet another tool for human connection. He showed vulnerability in a way that the world had never seen from a tough guy. When he lit the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996, with his hands trembling, he was not just lighting a fire. He was sending a message to every struggling person on the planet. He was saying that your physical condition does not define your spiritual power. That is the ultimate entrepreneurial lesson: adaptability. He turned his weakness into his greatest strength. He became the embodiment of resilience. He proved that the most powerful weapon in any arsenal is not a nuclear bomb or a billion-dollar ad campaign. It is the authentic human spirit standing unapologetically in its own truth. And beyond that spiritual power, we have to deconstruct the sheer genius of his asymmetric diplomacy. Take letter 1 EBF 9 Hey, imagine it is 1990. The world is on the brink of the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein has taken 15 American civilians hostage in Iraq, using them as human shields to prevent a U.S. attack. The Pentagon is powerless. The State Department is at a dead end. And then along comes Ali. He was already deep in the grip of Parkinson's disease. He could barely speak. He was trembling. But he flew to Baghdad against the express wishes of the American president. Why? Because he understood a level of game theory that the generals could not grasp. He knew Saddam Hussein was desperate for legitimacy in the Muslim world. Ali was not just a boxer, he was the most famous Muslim on the planet. He was the only person who had the cultural currency to sit across from a dictator and demand mercy without looking weak. He waited in a hotel room for days, running out of medication, his body failing him. But he did not budge. And the kicker is Saddam eventually relented. Ali brought every single one of those 15 men home. That is not luck. That is a masterclass in leveraging personal brand equity to achieve a geopolitical outcome that a superpower could not buy with Tomahawk missiles. Now let US pivot to the business logic behind his biggest fights. B letter 1 EA 1 N to letter 1 EDT, letter 1 B 0, letter 1 EDF NGT, letter 1 0, letter 1 E 3 NGZM in 1974. The Rumble in the Jungle was not just a boxing match. It was a disruptive economic model. Ali and his team bypassed the traditional American casinos and promoters who had monopolized the sport for decades. They went to Zaire. They secured a $5 million purse, an unheard of sum at the time, by partnering with a foreign sovereign state. He was the first global athlete to realize that he was the platform. He did not need the establishment needed him. This is the exact same logic we see today with creator economies and direct-to-consumer brands. Ali was decades ahead of the curve. He understood that by owning the narrative and the geography of the event, he could maximize his value and minimize the cut taken by middlemen. He was an entrepreneur in gloves, rewriting the revenue models of the global sports industry while the world was busy watching his footwork.
Chuo letter 1 EBFT Dao, we have to talk about the psychology of the anchor punch. In his second fight against Sonny Liston, Ali landed a blow so fast that half the crowd did not even see IT. They called IT the phantom punch. But in the world of strategy, we call this the speed of execution. Ali knew that if you can move faster than the market can react, you win before the competition even realizes the game has started. He used to say your hands cannot hit what your eyes cannot see. This is the ultimate lesson for any startup founder. In a world of giants, your only advantage is agility. Ali was not the strongest puncher, but he was the fastest thinker. He would provoke his opponents into a rage, making them emotional and sloppy while he remained calm and calculated. He was practicing mental models of cognitive bias long before they were taught at Harvard Business School. He would gaslight his opponents into defeat before they even stepped into the ring. Vekshi Kaletter 1 EBFT La Ali created a bridge between the West and the global South that still exists today. He was the first true global citizen of the television age. He showed that a black man from Kentucky could become the hero of the streets in Manila, the idol of the youth in Nairobi, and a savior in Baghdad. He transcended the Cold War binary of capitalism versus communism. He represented a third way, a moral way based on individual dignity and religious conviction. He was operating as a non-state actor with the diplomatic weight of a mid-sized country. When we talk about soft power today, we are really talking about the blueprint Muhammad Ali created. He proved that one man with a clear mission and a global voice can neutralize the agendas of empires. He was the ultimate disruptor not just of boxing, but of the entire global power structure. And he did it all by being unapologetically himself. T8 letter 1 ATD stroke letter 1 EA5Y, the strategic depth here is staggering. Think about the risk management involved in every move he made. Every time he spoke out, he was putting his life and his livelihood on the line. But he had a hedge. His hedge was his integrity. He knew that as long as he stayed true to his core values, his audience would never abandon him. And that is the deepest truth of leadership. In a world of shifting sands and changing narratives, authenticity is the only non-depreciating asset. Ali did not just box, he architected a legacy that grows more valuable with every passing decade. He was the original founder of the modern world, and his strategies are more relevant now in the age of the internet than they were in the age of radio. This is where IT gets really interesting. After the Supreme Court victory in 1971, Ali did not just return to boxing. He returned to reclaim the world. But the man who stepped back into the ring in the 1970s was not the same lightning-fast kid from Louisville. He was slower. He was heavier. But man, he was wiser. And this is the critical lesson for every entrepreneur who has ever faced a pivot or a market shift. When your physical assets change, you must upgrade your strategic assets. Ali developed the rope-a-dope. He learned to absorb punishment to exhaust his opponents. He turned his vulnerability into a trap. He was no longer just outboxing people, he was outthinking them. Think about the Thrilla in Manila in 1975. IT was brutal. IT was the closest thing to death he ever experienced. He later said IT was the moment he realized that even the greatest have limits. But here is the twist: he did not let those limits define his identity. He used the global stage to become the people's champion. He was no longer just fighting for a gold belt, he was fighting for the dignity of every person who had ever been told they were not enough. He had moved beyond the sport entirely. He had become a living, breathing manifesto for human freedom. Vakai Kaletter 1EB Efla Ali did not end his story with a knockout. He ended IT with a legacy that transcends time itself. When the lights faded and the crowds went home, he faced his toughest opponent, yet Parkinson is disease. But even then he was strategizing. He used his silence to speak louder than his shouts ever could. He taught US that your value is not in what you do, but in who you are. He showed US that the brand you build on integrity is the only thing that survives the test of time. The world watched him tremble, but they never saw him fear. That is the ultimate victory. B letter 1 EA1 Theta 1 ET, letter 1 B0, letter 1 EDFNGT, letter 1 B0, letter 1 EE3 NG If Ali had taken the easy path in 1967, if he had just gone to the induction center and taken the easy money, he would be a footnote in sports history.
Instead, he is a chapter in the history of humanity. So I have to ask you today, what is your Vietnam? What is the system telling you to do that your soul is rejecting? The blood lesson of Ali is simple. Do not trade your sovereignty for security. The short-term pain of standing your ground is the down payment on a legacy that will last forever. In the world of business and leadership, compromise is often the first step toward obscurity. T letter 1 EBF, nay, hey, we are all in the ring. We are all facing giants. But remember, the hands cannot hit what the eyes cannot see. Keep your vision clear. Keep your spirit unbreakable. And never ever let the establishment define your limits. Ali proved that one man can stand against the world and win, not by being the strongest, but by being the most authentic. He was the original disruptor, the global statesman, and the eternal rebel. Vado le pa letter 1a7 k letter 1ebftc, letter 1e7 amen, rising hom nay. Truly it has been an honor to break this down with you. The story of Muhammad Ali is not just about the past. It is a blueprint for the future. It is a call to action for everyone watching to find their own voice and stand their own ground. If this story struck a chord, if you are fighting your own impossible battle, or if you have a strategy that changed your life, I really want to hear it. This community is built on your stories. Please reach out to me at vadokviankni12@gmail.com. I read every message and I value your perspective. Stay bold, stay strategic, and above all, stay human. This is Men Rising. I am so proud of the global community we are building together. Until next time, the ring is yours. Peace.